Imagine getting Isekai'd into a dark forest where there's literally no one but you. The place is crawling with dangerous beasts, but don't worry, this isn't some hardcore survival story. It's a chill, slow life adventure where the MC starts building a peaceful life from scratch. Bit by bit, he befriends the creatures around him and turns the dangerous forest into something actually livable. So yeah, if you love stories where the MC builds his own world from zero, you're gonna love this one. Let's jump right into it. The story follows Tenno, a 35-year-old guy living a pretty ordinary life. One day, after another late morning and a long day at work, he was texting his little sister while crossing the street, and he got hit by the classic truck-kun. Yeah, pretty standard isekai setup. The next thing he knew, he woke up in what looked like some kind of afterlife. There were 4 other people there, but before he could even talk to them, they started glowing and disappeared. Suddenly, he was the only one left. Then he heard strange voices, probably gods, arguing in confusion. Apparently, they were trying to summon 4 heroes to another world, but something went wrong. If the summoning didn't finish, those heroes would just get sent back. They were called brave heroes, which reminded Tenno of his sister's favorite manga. While the gods were panicking, one of them suddenly yelled, realizing there was one person they had completely forgotten: Tenno. Poor guy wasn't even supposed to be there. Guess those gods were still amateurs at this whole summoning thing. Before he could react, light surrounded him. His body felt weightless, and everything went black. When Tenno opened his eyes again, he was lying in a dense forest. The air was cold and damp, thick fog everywhere, and everything felt heavy. His whole body ached, and his mood sank fast. Was this really another world, or the afterlife? Either way, it wasn't a good start. Thinking back to what the gods said, Tenno realized he might have been accidentally pulled into the hero summoning ritual. He remembered his sister's stories about fantasy worlds full of magic and demons. For a moment, he actually got a bit excited. But when he shouted out loud in the empty forest, there was no response. Kinda awkward. He started walking, but the deeper he went, the creepier it felt. Something strange seemed to be moving inside his body, like a weird energy or maybe a curse. He heard the wind rustling through the trees and tried to laugh it off, but honestly, he was freaking out. Trying to calm himself, he recalled one of his sister's stories about purification magic. Feeling desperate, he muttered a few lines like an idiot pretending to cast a spell, and somehow it worked. The heaviness faded, and the faint black mist around him disappeared. Shocked but relieved, Tenno realized there really was magic, and maybe evil spirits too. Just as he caught his breath, a massive beast appeared behind him. A wolf the size of a horse, with sharp fangs and glowing eyes. Tenno froze, trying to think fast. Run? Fight? Play dead? Before he could decide, the wolf suddenly collapsed. Even while lying down, it growled weakly, and dark mist swirled around its body. It wasn't just an ordinary animal, it was cursed. Seeing it struggle, Tenno couldn't help but feel sorry for it. So, despite his fear, he tried casting the same purification spell again. Light flared up around the wolf, and the dark mist vanished. To his surprise, it actually worked. The wolf stood up, calm this time, like a normal animal. Tenno had always been an animal lover, so when he saw the giant wolf up close, his first thought wasn't fear. It was how cute it looked. Its fur looked so soft that he actually wanted to pet it. As the wolf slowly walked toward him, Tenno froze, thinking he was about to get mauled. But instead, the wolf flopped onto its back and showed its belly like a tame dog asking for belly rubs. That completely caught Tenno off guard. Still, he noticed the wolf's fur was dirty, even after the purification earlier. So, trusting his gut, he tried casting a cleanse spell to wash it off. The magic worked. The wolf's fur turned snow white and gleamed in the faint light. After stretching lazily, the wolf got up and walked away into the woods. Tenno sighed in relief, thinking that was the end of it. But just a few moments later, the two of them were seen running together. Tenno was surprised by how fast he was running, and behind him, the wolf was following. Turns out, this wasn't just any ordinary beast. The wolf had sensed something strange from Tenno, something that told it this human wasn't normal at all. 200 years ago, this forest fell into darkness. No one knew how it happened. only that somehow humanity was responsible. When the darkness swallowed everything, the law of the jungle took over. The weak perished, and only the strongest survived. Among those survivors was King Fenrir, the same massive wolf Tenno had mistaken for a regular wolf. For 2 centuries, Fenrir had witnessed death, decay, and silence. His magic was strong enough to keep the darkness at bay for a while, but every use of purification drained his power. He couldn't afford to die yet, not before taking revenge on the humans who had cursed his forest. Then, one day, he caught the scent of a human, Tenno. Rage boiled inside him, but his body was too weak. Just as he was about to collapse, Tenno cast purification on him. Fenrir didn't expect much. To him, that spell only offered brief relief. But this time, the darkness vanished completely. He was stunned. The human before him carried overflowing magic, pure, limitless, and warm. It was the first time in centuries Fenrir felt peace, and the first time he didn't hate a human. Back to the present. Tenno and Fenrir climbed a hill, and once they reached the top, Tenno noticed a cave shrouded in darkness. It seemed like Fenrir wanted to show him that place. The atmosphere was eerie, the kind that made your skin crawl, and though Tenno hesitated to step inside, he decided to try using purification magic first. The spell worked, but only slightly. The darkness faded a little, yet the curse still lingered. As he stepped in, several glowing eyes appeared from within the shadows. It was a den full of wolves, all glaring at Tenno with clear hostility toward humans. But before anything could happen, Fenrir stepped forward, growling low, defending Tenno. That alone was enough to calm them down a bit, and Tenno quickly cast purification again. This time, the spell reached deeper, revealing piles of weakened wolves barely clinging to life. Fenrir's expression made it obvious. He was placing his hopes on Tenno. So, despite his fatigue, Tenno decided to give it another try. To use magic, Tenno always had to visualize what he wanted first. It was how his power worked. He imagined a wave of light spreading through the cave and cast a large-scale purification spell. In an instant, the darkness and curse vanished completely. Only then did he notice it wasn't just wolves. There were also dogs among them. Their fur was filthy, so Tenno used a simple cleaning spell to wash them all, making their coats shine again. It was strange, wolves and dogs living together in the same den, seemingly as friends. For now, Tenno didn't know what to do next. As he looked around, he noticed 2 paths deeper inside the cave. He turned to Fenrir, but the great beast shook his head, indicating he didn't know either. Still, Tenno could tell the wolves understood what he said, which was fascinating in itself. Curiosity got the better of him. He decided to move forward, believing the deeper the darkness, the stronger the curse, and maybe the closer he'd get to its source. He kept casting purification spells as they went, but the corruption seemed endless. The wolves started weakening again, so Tenno thought fast. He visualized a protective barrier and cast it, forming a glowing layer that blocked the curse from spreading inside. He wasn't sure if the barrier could withstand physical attacks though, so to be safe, he strengthened it. The light thickened, shimmering brighter around them, a fragile yet hopeful shield in the middle of the darkness. Tenno kept exploring deeper into the cave. It was way bigger than he expected. As the darkness grew thicker, he thought it'd be smart to cast a spell that let him see in the dark. So he imagined night vision and spatial awareness, then closed his eyes. Instantly, a clear image of his surroundings projected into his mind, like a mental map. Using that, he cast another barrier deeper into the cave, and as the barrier expanded, it pushed away the darkness, making the path visible. But before long, a massive boulder blocked the way forward. Tenno didn't even touch it yet, when the rock suddenly exploded. Instinctively, he raised his arm, but his barrier shielded him just in time. He felt something hitting against the barrier and realized there might be a curse inside that boulder. Then, strangely, the massive rock began to shrink, releasing dark energy until it became a small stone pulsing with a black aura. It almost felt alive. Curious, Tenno tried purification magic, but this time it didn't work. That threw him off. His purification had never failed before. Maybe his visualization wasn't strong enough? Determined, he imagined a persistent spell that would peel away the curse layer by layer. Slowly, the stone cracked and finally burst open. From inside, a tiny bird emerged, covered in blood and trembling weakly. It fluttered toward Tenno, clearly wounded. Without hesitation, Tenno visualized a healing spell that worked down to the cellular level. A soft light wrapped around the bird, closing its wounds and restoring its strength. Within moments, the creature looked healthy again, its feathers now gleaming. Feeling playful, Tenno teased it for being so small, only to get pecked right on the finger. It surprised him, but he laughed. Just like the wolves, this bird could understand him. Despite its size, it had quite the personality, and honestly, Tenno found it kind of adorable. After exploring the cave, Tenno took a short break, his head buzzing with questions, like why the barrier he made was literally glowing. There were still so many things about this new world he didn't understand. While resting, he noticed something weird. The black shadows outside were trying to slip through the barrier, but instead of just blocking them, the barrier fought back. It was almost like it had a will of its own. For now though, that meant Tenno could relax a bit. He knew he should probably study the magic more, but something else caught his attention. The wolves and dogs around him looked healthier. Their fur was clean, their breathing steady. It was strange, especially since none of them, including Fenrir, had eaten anything since they met. Still, he had bigger problems to deal with. Finding a safe place to sleep, some food, and water. Survival came first because he wanted to stay alive and not get caught up in something absurd and die. The cave could actually be a perfect shelter if he could purify it completely. But before that, he had to handle the black shadows outside the barrier. The fact that they reacted to his magic meant they had a source somewhere out there. It made his skin crawl, knowing something dark was still lurking nearby. He wanted to locate the source, but he couldn't purify it without seeing where it came from. So he activated his spatial awareness spell again, creating a mental mini-map of the cave. It helped, but the darkness was too thick in some areas, blurring the image. He needed something more, something that let him see from another angle. That's when he thought about drones. Back on Earth, drones gave aerial views. Why not try that with magic? He imagined a floating drone powered by clairvoyance magic, something that could scout from above. When he cast the spell, an interface appeared before him, like a holographic screen. On it, he saw a mountain surrounded by forests wrapped in black mist. Tenno observed carefully, then decided to purify everything within the drone's view. He even tried to send the curse back to wherever it came from. "You reap what you sow," he muttered under his breath. Then, with a large-scale purification spell, he cleansed the mountain's surroundings and created a massive barrier to keep the darkness from seeping back in. When Tenno unleashed that massive spell, he felt something flow out of his body, maybe his magic itself. Slowly, his barrier spread from the mountain to the surrounding forest, purifying everything in its path. By the time he finished, the woods looked alive again. No more black mist, no more corruption. For a moment, it felt peaceful, but an hour later, the shadows came back. When Tenno checked through his magical interface, he realized the curse was coming from deep underground. That ticked him off. This curse wasn't just stubborn, it was mocking him. So this time, he went all in. He cast another large-scale purification spell, way stronger than before, expanding the barrier deep into the earth and forcefully sending the curse back to its source. The spell worked, but the toll hit him hard. His hands trembled, his head pounded. It wasn't physical exhaustion, it was mental. He sat there, drained, his mind whispering the one thing he didn't want to admit. He wanted to go home. Sensing his distress, Fenrir quietly walked up and rested his heavy head on Tenno's lap. Despite the weight, the warmth helped calm him. For a while, Tenno just sat there, lost in thought, comforted by the silent presence of his companion. Meanwhile, far away in a human kingdom, deep within a royal chamber, stood a massive altar with a glowing magic stone at its center. Only now, that stone was beginning to erode. The next morning, a messenger rushed to the king, reporting something strange. An enormous white light had been seen bursting from the center of the forest. The king listened, then grinned. He assumed it was the Forest King's final struggle before death. With twisted excitement, he ordered more blood sacrifices to the magic stone, convinced that soon he would claim the forest, the center of the world, for himself. Long ago, that forest had been ruled by powerful beasts under a mighty king. But now, the human king wanted it all to himself. He didn't care how much blood it took, because in his madness, he believed this was the way. Meanwhile, in the Beastfolk Kingdom, a royal messenger reported troubling news about the forest to their king. Whether this kingdom was good or evil wasn't clear yet, but one thing was certain. They knew the human kingdom of Envelas had cast a massive and complex spell called Magic Eye across the entire forest. That dark magic had wiped out countless sacred beasts, replacing them with demonic creatures. For the past 200 years, no nation had dared to oppose it, mainly because every country near the forest had already been wiped off the map. The Beastfolk King suspected Envelas was behind it all, sacrificing hundreds of thousands of souls to maintain that wicked spell. They had no proof yet, but everyone knew one thing: humanity was close to dominating the world. And when that happened, the Beastfolk Kingdom might vanish just like the others. All they could do now was pray to the god of creation to stop the chaos. Back in the forest, Tenno woke up feeling refreshed, greeted by blue skies and his animal companions. He honestly thought the wolves would have left him by now, so he asked if they wanted to stay with him. Fenrir, who Tenno still thought was just a regular wolf, only growled softly in response. Tenno didn't understand, but he decided to name them anyway. The white, messy-furred wolf he met from the start got the name Koa. Two others with similar white fur, like Koa, were named Soa for the female and Hio for the male. The two male black and white wolves became Kuro and Shion, while the dog-like one he met earlier was named Chai. Finally, the tiny bird from the cave got the name Karen, based on its beautiful, gradient-colored feathers and lovely voice. Tenno thought he had great taste in names, though if his little sister were here, she'd probably say otherwise. Still, Fenrir, now officially Koa, was thrilled. He proudly told the other wolves that their human had given them names, and to him, that meant everything. If not for Tenno, the Fenrir race would have gone extinct. Koa deeply respected Tenno, not just for his strength and magic, but for his kindness. Even just being near Tenno made them stronger. Koa had already regained most of his magical power, so as the king of Fenrir, Koa ordered all the wolves to serve Tenno as their new lord. The direwolf Chai, who had long lived under Fenrir's protection, also decided to follow along. From that day, Koa swore that his pack would give their all for Tenno. Later, while they were talking, Tenno asked Koa if he knew where they could find water. The wolves all went silent, staring at him for a moment. Then suddenly, Kuro and Shion bolted down the mountain, competing to guide him. Surprised, Tenno chased after them, following until they passed beyond the barrier. When they finally stopped, Tenno froze. Before him was a pool of black water, bubbling like it was alive. He wasn't even sure it was water, but Kuro and Shion looked so excited, he didn't have the heart to tell them. The water was clearly cursed. Purifying it would take a long time. Still, he smiled and praised the two wolves for their effort. They wagged their tails proudly. For now, Tenno decided to head back. He was still exhausted, and he'd need more strength to cleanse that place. But as he walked, his mind kept picturing clean, clear water. And then, out of nowhere, it appeared. Cool, sparkling water flowed right into his palm, conjured by his magic. When Tenno made water appear from his hands with magic, a thought hit him. If he could create water, maybe he could create anything. So he tried imagining a full gyudon meal, steaming hot with all the sides. But nothing happened. Not even a grain of rice. He tried simpler stuff, like cabbage, chicken, and apples. Still nothing. Maybe it was impossible to create food or ingredients that didn't exist in this world. Looks like he'd have to find his own food the old-fashioned way. For shelter, Tenno figured the rocky mountain could work as a base, but first, he had to make sure the area was safe. He still hoped the forest had edible plants or fruits, but after wandering around for hours, all he found were plain trees. No fruits, no nuts, nothing. When he complained about starving to death, Hio suddenly bumped him from behind and barked. Then, Hyo, Kuro, and Shion exchanged glances and dashed off into the forest. Tenno had no clue where they were going. He couldn't understand Fenrir's language anyway. Even their leader, Koa, just barked whenever Tenno tried to talk. Still, Tenno trusted they'd return soon, so he invited Koa to keep searching for food with him. As they explored further down the mountain, he stumbled upon another cave, bigger and cleaner than the one before. Using spatial awareness, Tenno scanned its structure. The cave had several upper paths and underground chambers, roughly the size of a 3-story building. Just seeing it made him excited. Before long, the 3 wolves returned, dragging a huge monster that looked like a cursed wild boar. Their tails wagged proudly. They had hunted it for him. But Tenno hesitated. The creature looked terrifying, still wrapped in black miasma. Yet seeing the wolves' eager faces, he couldn't just turn them down. He praised their hard work, hugged them, and quietly wondered who's supposed to dismantle this thing. First things first, he needed to cleanse the curse. He pictured a vacuum cleaner sucking up all the black energy, then purified it while sending the curse back to its source. In seconds, the mist vanished, leaving behind a clean, oversized wild boar, now officially edible. But there was another issue. The wolves couldn't exactly butcher it themselves, which meant Tenno had to do it, alone. He gulped. The sight of the giant body was intimidating, but the hungry stares from the wolves pushed him to act fast. He figured the meat might spoil if left out, so he imagined the cooling effect of a luxury refrigerator and cast refrigeration. Instantly, a wave of chill spread through the monster's flesh. Step 1, done. Then came the part he dreaded, the blood. Tenno hated blood. Just looking inside made his stomach twist. Still, he tried to find a magical workaround. What if he treated the blood like water and just drained it out gently? He tried draining it carefully, imagining the liquid flowing away like water. Not too dry, just enough. Still, when he peeked inside and saw the organs, his stomach churned. Meanwhile, the wolves were busy gossiping about what their lord was doing. From their point of view, that giant boar monster would have tasted way better if eaten fresh and hot. While they grumbled about that, Tenno was deep in thought, figuring out how to get rid of the veins and organs inside the monster's body. Eventually, he decided to just rip them out instantly and burn them. On the other side, Koa was explaining to the others that their master didn't have claws or fangs like they did, so things naturally took longer for him. The others were ready to help, of course. They just didn't move unless ordered. Anyway, Tenno cast instantaneous movement, pulling out the monster's veins in a blink. The wolves wagged their tails, impressed, until he immediately burned everything to ashes with a burn spell. With the blood dealt with, Tenno moved on to the next step, getting rid of the nasty smell. He'd cut fish before, but this was on a whole different level. Boars had organs like a heart, kidneys, and brain. Gross, but he had no choice. Using the same spell, he removed all the organs. The wolves got even more excited, thinking they'd get to eat the good parts, but Tenno burned those too. Their faces dropped, while Tenno smiled in relief as the stench finally faded. Once that was done, he used wind magic to slice the massive corpse into neat chunks. In no time, the monster was reduced to clean slabs of meat. He took one piece to cook for himself and handed the rest to the wolves. Hyo, Kuro, and Shion dashed off first, practically drooling. Nearby, Chai hesitated and asked King Fenrir if he could eat too. Of course, Koa allowed it, reminding him they all needed to cooperate if they wanted their forest restored. Seeing Chai's timid posture, Koa reminded him that he was once a king too, the king of direwolves. But Chai just lowered his head, saying he'd long abandoned that title, now nothing more than a failed leader who couldn't protect his own pack. While they ate, Koa told Chai to start calling each other by the names their lord had given them. Apparently, receiving a name from a figure such as a master was something they'd dreamed of for ages. Meanwhile, Tenno was struggling with his own meal. He'd burned the meat into charcoal. Sighing, he asked the wolves for another piece and decided to try again. This time, smarter. He placed the meat on a flat rock, imagined it being grilled over charcoal, and added a layer of infrared heat to cook it evenly. Slowly, smoke began to rise, and a rich, mouth-watering aroma filled the air. The wolves instantly turned their heads, drool dripping as they watched. After a few minutes, the meat was perfectly cooked, crispy brown on the outside, juicy red on the inside. Tenno skewered it with a stick, took a bite, and his eyes lit up. Delicious. But while they all enjoyed their meal, none of them noticed the dark shadow lurking deep within the cave, silently watching. After finishing their meal, Tenno and the others started exploring the cave they'd found earlier to see if it could serve as a proper base. Inside and out, the place looked stable. No traps, no strange traces of life. With its high ceiling and wide space, Tenno decided the first floor would make a perfect main hall. Then he went deeper, to the first underground level. It was even larger than he expected, the ceiling towering high above, with a shimmering light coming from the back wall that caught his attention. The area seemed safe, but that dark, cursed presence he'd felt earlier was still lurking somewhere below. Activating his spatial awareness again, he checked the surroundings and the barrier he'd cast before, wondering how long it would last. He didn't understand much about magic yet, and that bothered him. If he wanted to survive here, he had to learn more. Still, since the disturbance came from below, there was no choice but to go deeper. Hugging Koa for comfort, Tenno hesitated. He didn't want to go down there, but Koa licked his face, reassuring him in his own way. With that, Tenno took a breath and descended, and sure enough, there it was. A thick cluster of black miasma seething with curses. Koa immediately growled, sensing danger. Before Tenno could react, another black mass appeared, rushing forward. Startled, Tenno tried to cast Purification, but it didn't work. The barrier he'd set earlier was what activated instead, cleansing the darkness the moment it touched it. He blinked in confusion. Just the barrier alone could purify it? But when the miasma vanished, nothing was left behind. At least, that's what he thought, until he glanced down and noticed a tiny creature on the ground. It looked like an insect, or maybe a spider. It was no wonder he hadn't noticed it sooner. It was barely the size of his finger. It even had wings. Before he could examine it properly, another surge of dark mist seeped from the ground. Tenno calmly purified it again, and this time, more creatures appeared. What came out of the black lump of shadows was a chief spider, followed by about 20 young spiders. So there were insects in this world after all, or maybe monsters. Tenno wasn't sure. While he was lost in thought, Koa crouched low to inspect them. But before either of them could react, Chief Spider suddenly jumped, landing right on Tenno's head. He flinched, shaking his hair, trying not to panic. Meanwhile, poor Chai had baby spiders crawling all over him, spinning in circles, trying to shake them off. Yet, despite all that, the spiders didn't attack. They just stayed close, calm, and harmless. Seeing that, Tenno realized maybe these creatures weren't enemies at all. Forget about the spiders for now. Tenno's more focused on the second underground layer. The place is surprisingly huge, and he plans to explore it later. Right now, what really matters is understanding how magic works. Before this, he'd just been shouting spells and purifying things without any clear image in his head. But according to his sister, visualization is key to using magic properly. So, Tenno decides to test it. First, he casts a fire spell without imagining anything, and nothing happens. Then, he tries a water spell, still not visualizing anything, and suddenly, a puddle appears beside him. That just confuses him even more. Next, he tries again, this time imagining fire clearly in his mind, and it works perfectly. Now he's even more lost. Fire needs an image, but water doesn't. After several tries, he comes up with a theory. When learning a new spell, a clear mental image is needed, but once the spell is mastered, just saying the chant might be enough. It's just a hypothesis, but it seems to fit. While he's deep in thought, the flame he summoned suddenly flickers, revealing a crack in the stone wall where air is leaking out. It's dark inside, too dark to see, so Tenno imagines a ball of light to light it up. The spell works, but the light's way too bright, making Koa squint. After adjusting the brightness a few times, Tenno sighs in relief. Controlling magic precisely is way harder than he thought. Once the glow is just right, he peeks through the crack and spots something shiny inside the crevice. The chief spider, small enough to squeeze through, crawls in and comes back carrying a fragment of the glittering stone. Up close, the stone looks stunning, silvery, and luminous. Tenno thanks the chief, thinking that chief really is the right name for the biggest spider. When Tenno holds the fragment, Kuro and Shion rush over, clearly excited. He doesn't really get why. They seem to recognize the stone as something rare. Sure, it looks beautiful, but Tenno decides to store it away for now. He's more interested in exploring the upper floors anyway. Meanwhile, the wolves are buzzing with disbelief. Their master just found mithril, a precious metal, and reacted like it was no big deal. After exploring the entire cave, Tenno finds no more hidden passages or rooms. With that, the conquest of the Rocky Mountain is complete. A moment later, Tenno started unpacking the few things left in his small bag. Just a wallet, shopping receipts, and what looked like a shopping voucher. Nothing useful. He sighed, realizing his smartphone had probably been thrown away when he got hit by that truck. His original plan after securing the cave as a base was to look for other humans. But for now, he wanted to make this place at least comfortable enough to sleep in. The rocky floor was killing his back. He mumbled at the thought of something smoother and softer. But then, out of nowhere, his magic activated on its own. The rough stone floor he rubbed beneath him started to shine, turning perfectly smooth and polished in an instant. Tenno froze, stunned. The wolves stared too, their tails wagging in awe. Apparently, just by imagining it, he could enhance the cave's comfort that easily. Before long, the entire floor looked like a glossy ice rink. Koa and the others couldn't hide their excitement, praising their master for the miracle. Eager to test it, Koa stepped onto the new floor and almost slipped right away. Chai tried next and ended up sliding just the same. The floor might have been too slick, but one thing was clear. Everyone was thrilled by their shiny new home. That night, Chief Spider quietly observed the barrier Tenno had cast. It shimmered faintly, pushing back the black miasma and curses trying to invade. The sight stirred memories within him, reminding him of who he once was. Long ago, he was the one who wore Hell's flames, dragging any prey foolish enough to approach into molten fire. His kin feared him, and anyone who laid eyes on his true form was doomed to die. He was once known as Tarunia, the Death Keeper. Now though, his body was small, nothing like the terrifying being he used to be. He had spent nearly all his magic protecting his children, and that was the only reason he was still alive. Still, he couldn't stop wondering how such powerful miasma could vanish so completely. While he was lost in thought, a familiar voice called his name, Tarunia. It was King Fenrir who was Koa. As he suspected, the little creature was someone he knew. Seizing the moment, Tarunia asked about the darkness that once engulfed the forest. Koa explained that Tenno was the one who purified it. He even saved the Fenrir race from destruction. Tarunia was skeptical at first. A human did that? But Koa assured him that Tenno's magic was extraordinary, far beyond human standards. That's why the Fenrir clan had chosen to serve him. Koa's tone then turned sharp, warning Tarunia not to do anything against their master, or he'd deal with him personally. But Tarunia wasn't reckless. He had already sensed Tenno's overwhelming mana. It was hundreds of times greater than both his and Koa's combined at full strength. Koa smirked, satisfied with the response. He joked about not wanting to lose another king of the forest. Before leaving, Koa also asked him to tell his kids to stop teasing Chai. Chai? Tarunia tilted his head. Koa proudly explained that their master had given them all names now. That reminded Tarunia. Tenno had called him Chief. The name felt strange, yet warm. Maybe he kind of liked it. From now on, he'd be Chief. Before wrapping up their talk, Chief mentioned he'd sensed a terrifying burst of magic the previous night and wondered if Koa knew anything about it. Koa guessed it was probably a human attack, but thankfully, Tenno's barrier completely blocked it. That revelation left Chief speechless. A barrier strong enough to stop that kind of magic? That should have been impossible. Even Koa admitted he couldn't hold a barrier like that for more than a second, but Tenno hadn't even flinched. Meanwhile, in one corner of the cave, Tenno sat deep in thought. The idea that there might be no other humans in this world had been bothering him. A few days ago, after setting up the cave as his base, he sent out his clairvoyance drone to scout the forest. But no matter how far it flew, there wasn't a single sign of human life, just animals wandering around. No villages, no roads, nothing but endless trees stretching to the horizon. That realization annoyed him. He grumbled and sulked for a while, but his mood lifted when he remembered how smoothly the cave renovation had gone. Bit by bit, it was turning into a real home. He'd already smoothed the floors and walls, carved stairs connecting the upper and lower levels, and even practiced instantaneous movement magic while shaping the passages. From the outside, the place looked like an ordinary rocky mountain, but inside, it had become a 4-story home with 2 underground floors. Here are the details of the cave map for now. The second basement, where he'd found Chief, was planned to be a mithril processing room, or silver, at least that's what Tenno thought it was. The first basement, which held golden ores, was now a chilled storage room. The first floor was his main hall, thanks to its high ceiling. The second floor was still undecided. The third served as a stone storage area, and the top floor was his safe, cozy bedroom. Even with all that progress, Tenno couldn't help feeling a little lonely. There was no one to talk to, besides the wolves, who occasionally brought him fresh game. Lately, Koa and the others had been competing over who could devour the organs first. He figured that was fine for animals, but honestly, he was getting sick of meat. What he really wanted was fish. While he was relaxing and roasting meat, Koa suddenly growled. Before Tenno could ask why, a powerful wave of curses blew through the forest, sending the wolves into a panic. They bolted out, tails tucked between their legs. Tenno sighed in frustration. His peaceful evening ruined again. He walked to the edge of the mountain, took a deep breath to calm down, and summoned his clairvoyance drone once more. Through its view, he saw the entire forest blanketed in a thin layer of curses. In the distance, where he remembered a huge lake outside his old barrier, everything was now shrouded in darkness. So he decided to purify everything up to that lake, and at the same time expand and strengthen the barrier. Koa barked in alarm, clearly worried, but Tenno barely noticed. He was focused. He'd gotten used to magic now, and he was confident he could pull it off. He pictured a thin thread stretching far into the distance, reaching toward the lake. It was far, but he could feel the connection. Light gathered in his hands as he imagined spreading his magic across the forest, covering everything, even the underground. Then, with the words barrier and purification, he activated the spell. A surge of power rippled outward, spreading rapidly through the land. In moments, the entire forest glowed faintly as the curses lifted. Just like that, Tenno had purified the forest and expanded his barrier tenfold. Somehow, his body even felt lighter afterward. Watching from behind, both Chief and Koa could only stare in awe. They realized neither of them could ever match Tenno's power. Still, Tenno noticed something odd. Some of the lake's water was still tainted, so he planned to filter it using the barrier itself, turning it into a giant purification screen. But one thing was certain, someone out there was casting these curses, and from now on, Tenno decided he'd send those piles of curses right back to whoever was behind them. Meanwhile, in the human kingdom of Envelas, protected by a massive magic circle powered by towering pillars, 2 knights in full armor crossed paths. One was Mizlost, commander of the 4th Chivalric Order, who had just returned from scouting the forest. The other was Ganmirs, commander of the 1st Chivalric Order. Mizlost looked relaxed after his patrol. The forest hadn't changed much, barely any monsters were showing up, and with the king's powerful barrier holding strong, he felt the kingdom was completely safe. His cheerful mood clashed with Ganmir's, who seemed uneasy. A few days earlier, a strange light had burst out from the center of the forest, spreading in every direction. Yes, the king's magic stone allowed humans to suppress the forest kings, but Ganmir's had never seen such a drastic shift before. It bothered him. Mizlost noticed the worry, explaining that the 4th expedition had been increased because of it, but he still insisted everything was fine. Envelas had survived foreign invasions for hundreds of years, thanks to the king and the court magicians. Even so, they still needed to stay cautious of magical beasts outside the barrier. After saying that, Mizlost headed home to rest. Left alone, Ganmir's thoughts drifted back to the magic stone. The complex spell Magic Eye, used to control the forest known as the center of the world, was supported by just a single stone. Rumor said it came from an ancient ruin and gave off an unnatural magical presence. Some even whispered that the blood of the magicians who tried to analyze it had been spilled. The king and his court magicians were the first to tap into its power, halting their own aging and ruling for centuries. Ganmir's had investigated this himself, unable to shake his curiosity about the stone holding the entire kingdom together. His train of thought broke when a line of beastfolk slaves walked past him, eyes lifeless. A glowing crest burned on their backs, likely a slave seal. Behind them, the old slave trader snapped his whip to make them move faster. Ganmir's spoke briefly with the old man, who complained he was running out of stock. 50 beastfolk slaves had already been taken as offerings for the magic stone. With a grumble that they'll need more, the old man walked off. Before Ganmir's could process what that meant, another knight approached him. Gamul, commander of the 5th Chivalric Order. Ganmir's knew him well, a battle addict who lived for bloodshed. He immediately noticed Gamul's new sword. It turned out to be a gift from the king, a magic blade that grew sharper and stronger with every drop of blood it drank, much like the king's own sword. Gamul, excited like a mad dog, spotted a few beastfolk slaves nearby. With a single swing, he sliced through several of them, their heads hitting the ground before their bodies even fell. The blade gleamed, hungering for more. But Gamul clicked his tongue in disappointment. Killing slaves wasn't fun. They didn't react because of the slave crest. From a distance, Ganmir's acted like he was used to it, but inside, disgust twisted in his chest. The kingdom of Envelas, he realized, had gone completely insane. Meanwhile, in the forest, Tenno was proudly testing a simple fishing rod he'd made from a branch. He was ridiculously happy with it, so happy that even the wolves were playing with it like it was a new toy. With high hopes, he headed straight to the lake to finally catch some fish, only to find the water still contaminated by curses. It completely crushed him. But quitting wasn't an option. He tried purifying the lake again, chanting his spell, but the result didn't even budge. Curses mixed into water were way harder to clean than he thought, so he attempted a different approach, casting a barrier to temporarily seal the lake and the downstream river. It looked promising, but Tenno wasn't sure he could pull it off. His idea was to filter the river's source through a barrier membrane, but separating the curse across such a huge area felt impossible. The stuff was everywhere, like dirt scattered in the wind. Then, while petting Koa's fur, inspiration hit him. Static electricity, like when dust sticks to your hand. With that thought, he raised his hand toward the lake and imagined coating its entire surface with a static charge. Chanting adsorption, he watched as the scattered curse slowly clumped together, rising to the surface. Soon enough, the lake looked less like cursed water and more like a toxic waste pond. At the same time, inside Envelas, specifically the chamber housing the Great Magic Stone, the court magicians sensed something off. One mage realized the stone was being pressured from somewhere close. As they investigated, they spotted a faint glow on the stone's surface and immediately recognized the area. It was the lake. Back in the forest, Tenno had finished gathering every bit of curse into one massive floating clump. And today, he planned to keep his promise, send the curse back to whoever cast it. With the chant, "Return," the entire mass was slowly sucked into a void, disappearing completely. The cursed water cleared in an instant, leaving the lake sparkling clean. Sunlight reflected off the pure surface, turning it into something peaceful and almost magical. Even the river brightened, and fresh fruits began appearing along the forest again. Tenno couldn't wait to see the animals return. His job here was done, so he headed home to continue working on his interior design project. Back in the Magic Stone room, one mage noticed a scratch on the surface of the stone. A moment later, a burst of blinding light exploded from it. Fear spread across his face when he saw a long, deep crack running across the stone. Looks like Tenno's little return to sender actually worked. Meanwhile, in the throne room, the king was listening to the daily reports, though he looked like he'd fall asleep any second. The only thing he actually cared about was news from the forest. He'd already increased the sacrifices for the Magic Stone barrier and expected the forest to be in his grasp soon. He clearly had a plan, use the forest kings for his own benefit, and then wipe out the filthy Beastman kingdom afterward. Right as he was lost in his fantasies, a guard burst into the room, shouting with panic. His face was pale as he reported an emergency. The magic stone had cracked. At first, the king and his advisors thought it was a joke. The chamber was protected by a high-class barrier, after all. But the guard insisted. There was nothing wrong with the barrier. The entire room had flashed with blinding light, and once it faded, a huge crack appeared across the magic stone. The king's expression twisted into fury. With a single slash of his sword, he cut the guard clean in half, using him as an outlet for his rage. The throne room fell into a suffocating silence. Ganmirts, watching from the side, hated the king's cruelty, but he couldn't speak up or his fate would be like a slave's. Then, the king called for Mislost, commander of the 4th Chivalric Order, and ordered him to rush into the forest immediately and investigate the source of the problem. A few days later, deep in the forest, Tenno and Koa were sprinting for their lives as a gigantic wooden plank came crashing down behind them. They barely dodged it in time. But why in the world did a massive plank fall from the sky like that? Well, we're about to find out. Lately, Tenno had been busy upgrading his cave house. What used to be a shapeless hole in the mountain now looked like an actual home. He even built a grill on the first floor so he could roast meat properly. The first floor had become a full kitchen and dining area, big enough for everyone to eat together. The smell of roasted meat instantly made Koa drool, and Tenno couldn't help giving him a few pieces. Koa was so shocked by how good it tasted that the other wolves wanted some too. Tenno already planned to feed them, but before that, he called Chai over. Chai hesitated, feeling unworthy, but with his friends cheering him on, he finally took the meat. And just like that, they all started eating together from that day on. After a good meal, nothing beats a warm bath. And for Tenno, it felt like heaven. Sure, he could clean himself with magic, but as a Japanese guy, he just couldn't abandon the concept of bathing. No soap, no company, just hot water in a big tub. Perfect. Then came the part he'd been dreaming of, a toilet. For days, he had to sneak into the forest just to do his business. But now, he could finally stop suffering. He used his magic to polish stone and ended up making an actual working toilet. Even better, he added a sink, and both came with auto-cleaning. He was so excited that he yelled in celebration, which unfortunately made Koa rush over out of curiosity, catching Tenno mid-poop. Koa instantly felt guilty for seeing his master in such a vulnerable state, while Tenno nearly died of embarrassment. Still, he was so proud of his creation that he made a toilet on every floor. During magic practice, Tenno also discovered he could stretch mithril, yes, mithril, into thin glass-like sheets. Koa and Chief were stunned. Since the transparent mithril looked great, Tenno used it as window panes. Then, inspiration hit him. Why not build wooden floors too? So he headed into the forest to chop down a straight, sturdy tree. He remembered from TV that wood needed years of drying, but magic made all of that easy. He stripped the bark, cleaned the trunk, and used wind magic to slice it into planks. And this brings us back to the opening scene. Tenno forgot to cut the base properly, causing the gigantic plank to topple over and nearly flatten him and Koa. Thankfully, they survived, and now he had plenty of wood to work with. Using instantaneous movement, he casually teleported the planks to the front of the house, letting them float straight into the 4th floor like it was nothing. Not long after, the wooden planks were stacked neatly on the 4th floor, and Tenno finally started working on the wood flooring. In his head, it sounded easy, but reality hit hard. Every plank had gaps, the thickness wasn't consistent, and the boards were way too huge and heavy. Even his instantaneous movement magic wasn't much help. Somehow, the perfect floor plan in his imagination turned into a mess, and only after all that work, he realized the wood could get moldy if installed on solid stone. On top of that, he still had tons of leftover planks, so Tenno decided to try something else. He wished he had an edge tool, something to shave wood slowly and precisely. Since he didn't, he tried making one from silver or mithril. He stretched the ore until it became thin like a blade, and when he tested it on a rock, it actually pierced straight in. That mountain rock wasn't soft at all, so he told himself to be careful with it. But with magic, the rock became flexible, almost like clay. That fascinated Tenno, and he even started thinking about making a pot, because he was getting tired of eating only meat. While imagining tools like window hinges and other parts, he accidentally shaped the mountain rock into a doll, and it didn't look bad at all. He hadn't played with clay in years, so it was actually fun. He got carried away and made a few more dolls, even adjusting their eyes so they could glow. The next morning, after falling asleep while making dolls, Tenno woke up to something absurd. The perfectly installed wood flooring he dreamed of was already done. The planks were neatly placed with 0 gaps, complete with a foundation. And guess who did it? Yep, the dolls he made from mountain rock. They were hauling wooden boards with their tiny bodies, moving like professional carpenters. One even acted like the lead worker, pointing and directing the others with surprising precision. Tenno and the wolves just stood there, stunned, all eyes slowly turning to him as if asking, "What did you do?" He seriously had no idea. 9 dolls were moving, meaning 1 was missing. And when he thought back, he remembered shaping those dolls while thinking about tiny elves from that story, the ones who helped a shoemaker at night. He even wished the flooring could magically finish while he slept. Maybe that wish actually stuck. Tenno eventually found the last doll lying still. It was the 10th one he made. After that, Tenno walked up to the dolls and told them to stop working and gather around. To his surprise, they actually listened. The little stone bodies lined up neatly in front of him, like they were trained for this. Then he turned to the last inactive doll. He touched it, pushed a simple command into it, telling it to act as a helper robot. Instantly, it stood up, glowing faintly, and began guiding the other dolls like a supervisor. Just like that, Tenno suddenly had a full squad of tiny stoneworkers. Meanwhile, Koa and the other wolves were in complete panic. Tears welled in their eyes the moment they recognized what the dolls really were: golems, the same weapons humans once used to invade the forest. No wonder they were terrified. From Tenno's point of view, they just looked extremely cautious around the stone dolls. Even so, he hoped they could learn to get along eventually. The next morning, Tenno left the wood flooring work on the 2nd and 3rd floors to the dolls, finally freeing him up to do something he'd been craving: looking for vegetables and spices. Walking through the forest with Koa, he noticed a thin layer of fog still lingering. He cleaned it up as they moved, wondering if the floating light spot was really the source of the curse. He also couldn't help thinking about the people on the other side, since he kept sending their curse right back at them. Either way, the forest was way brighter now compared to when he first arrived. While enjoying the peaceful walk, he spotted something shocking: a fruit hanging high up in a tree. His first fruit here. He tried climbing, stretching, and even jumping, but the tree was just too tall. Right when frustration kicked in, a spider suddenly hopped onto the trunk and waved at him like it was signaling something. Then 8 more followed, crawling up the tree. That's when it hit him. These were the young spiders, and they'd grown fast, basically as big as Chief now. He hoped it was just in his head, but no. Koa and the other wolves were bigger too. The young spiders came back down carrying the fruit for him. It was round, bright red, and about 3 times the size of an orange. Tenno wasn't sure if it was edible, so he carefully split it open. Inside was juicy, vibrant flesh. One bite, and his whole body trembled. Tears even slipped out. He hadn't tasted anything sweet in so long. The crisp texture reminded him of a peach. Of course, he shared it with Koa and the young spiders. A while later, they had way more fruit than expected. Tenno had accidentally picked too much, and now had no idea what to do with the pile. His bag could only hold 1 at a time. Joking to himself, he wished the bag worked like a robot's pocket. And right on cue, magic happened. The fruit slipped into the bag effortlessly. He tested a few more, and yep, everything fit. Magic really was convenient. He kept exploring until he found more vegetables. Meanwhile, the wolves had gone hunting. By the time Tenno returned home, several animals were already laid out, and Shiro and the others ran up to him excitedly, like they were asking for praise. Not wanting to lose, Tenno proudly revealed the fruits and vegetables he found. Even without salt, he thought their diet would improve with all this. He drained the boar's blood, then used wind magic to peel the skin clean off. Once the meat was ready, he sliced it and laid it neatly on wooden boards for the wolves. He even saved the organs for them, but reminded them, at least in spirit, to to eat properly. While the wolves dug in, Tenno set aside portions for himself and storage. Salt would have helped him make ham or something fancy, but for now, this was good enough. He stored the rest in the refrigerated room in the basement, then stared at the vegetables, unsure where to keep them. In the main room, Karen was drooling over the meat Tenno was grilling. He knew the bird preferred cooked meat anyway. This time, he paired the meat with the sweet, cabbage-like vegetables he'd found, plus a tangy fruit with a refreshing scent. He wrapped the grilled meat with the veggies and squeezed the sour fruit over the top. The taste was richer, way better than plain meat. Still not perfect. He wished he had a proper sauce. Then, mid-bite, a thought struck him. He hadn't seen Chief at all, even though every other wolf was here eating. After 3 straight days of renovation, the upstairs wood flooring was finally done. Tenno gave the stone dolls a pretty specific list of follow-up tasks, and somehow they understood instantly. Next thing he knew, they were huddled together like a team of professional contractors planning their next move. When Tenno stepped outside, he finally ran into Chief again. And wow, the spider had grown huge, like he was back in his prime. Honestly, Tenno was a little intimidated. Chief's body looked way too intense now, but the big guy was overflowing with gratitude after Tenno poured all that mana into him. Chief kept waving his legs around as if explaining something, and as usual, Tenno had no idea what he was trying to say. Still, he was sure of one thing: Chief was smart, friendly, and absolutely not planning to eat him. Seeing Chief reminded Tenno of a problem he'd been ignoring: clothes. His were getting worn out, and since Chief was a spider, surely he had skills with thread, right? So Tenno tried explaining what he needed, and asked if there were any long, fibrous plants he could harvest. Not long after, Tenno headed into the forest with Chai, Kuro, and Chief, mostly because Koa wasn't around, and for the wolves, this was apparently a huge honor. Chai especially looked like he wanted to prove something. That plan lasted about 5 minutes before they all ran into a gigantic caterpillar. Chai and Kuro were instantly disgusted and terrified, which made Chief's proud reveal look hilarious. The giant caterpillar was exactly what he wanted to show Tenno. Something long, harvestable, and perfect for making thread. Chief lifted the caterpillar to demonstrate, but then the thing suddenly sneezed and shot something weird straight at Tenno. Chief and the wolves freaked out and scolded the caterpillar, but Tenno was totally fine. Turned out the weird stuff was actually tough, high-quality thread. Perfect. Chief let out a relieved wiggle, while Chai and Kuro sank into despair because they basically contributed nothing. Eventually, they were assigned the very important job of carrying the giant caterpillar home. When they arrived, Koa was already waiting at the door. Their bond looked even stronger now, especially when Tenno hugged the giant wolf like it was the most natural thing in the world. With the thread source secured, Tenno moved on to the next step. Since the giant caterpillar was now a key part of his textile plan, he decided to convert the unused second floor into a rearing room. He added windows, ventilation, food, a place to sleep for the caterpillar, and even added an automatic cleaning spell into the wood flooring so the room wouldn't turn into a disaster. For the finishing touch, he assigned 2 stone dolls as permanent caretakers for the caterpillars. With that set, the whole thread production plan was basically solved. Watching the dolls work made Tenno wonder how they would actually make the cloth. He took off his worn-out shirt, and the threadworker dolls immediately grabbed it to inspect it. After a quick discussion, they looked confident. They had a solution. Oh, and Tenno also requested a bed. One of the dolls simply grabbed his hand and dragged him to show it off. The bed was sturdy, made of thick wood, and surprisingly well crafted. Even crazier, they'd finished it in half a day. By nightfall, Tenno slept on his new bed with Koa and the others curled around him. And right then, he finally understood. Mattresses are a blessing. A few days passed, and the stone dolls were evolving way faster than Tenno expected. What used to be bare stone walls was now covered with clean wooden panels. They even built actual furniture, dining tables, chairs, and somehow, plates, cups, and chopsticks. It was crazy how just having those made every meal taste better. While watching them work, Tenno noticed there were only 8 dolls around. Maybe the other 2 were still in the caterpillar room, and yep, When he checked, those two had just finished crafting a full outfit from giant caterpillar thread. The shirt was a smooth, elegant light green, paired with simple black pants that looked surprisingly comfy. Tenno crouched down, watching the caterpillar munch on its food, wondering if the thread would change color depending on what it ate. Either way, he suddenly had plenty of spare clothes now, which felt like a luxury. Inside the room, he also noticed a full weaving setup, an actual loom. The stone dolls must have built it, and the threadworker dolls were the ones weaving everything into finished clothes. Honestly, it was amazing. With his mood boosted thanks to his new outfit, Tenno headed into the forest with Koa and the others to hunt for seasonings. He was really hoping to find rock salt or something, and he couldn't help but wonder if this world even had an ocean. They kept walking until they stumbled upon another cave, one Tenno hadn't seen before. It was big and not too far from home. As he checked the entrance, he felt a strange curse lingering deep inside. So with his light spell ready, Tenno and the wolves decided to explore it. The deeper they went, the wider the tunnel became, sloping softly downward. Before long, they heard a faint clacking sound echoing at the end of the passage. When they stepped into the chamber, Tenno froze. A massive room full of ant-like creatures, all drenched in a thick, unsettling curse. And what scared him most? The ants were huge. No wonder Koa growled fiercely beside him. It felt like a showdown between a giant wolf and giant ants. But Tenno wasn't here to stand by and watch. He tried helping with a purification spell, only to panic when it didn't work. Shocked, he cast a purification barrier next, but that also had zero effect. One of the giant ants immediately lunged at him. Koa reacted instantly, stepping forward to shield his master. Thanks to Koa's strike and the barrier's protection, Tenno narrowly avoided getting torn apart. Even after being knocked back, the giant ants kept pushing forward, radiating pure hostility. While Koa and the others fought their hardest to defend him, Tenno focused on observing the ants more closely, their dark patterns, their twisted movements, and the deeper he looked, the more uncomfortable he felt. Tenno and the three wolves were now surrounded. Way too many cursed ants, all of them attacking non-stop. The purification barrier kept them safe, but it didn't lift the curse at all. That alone stressed Tenno out. The black patterns covering these ants looked nothing like the misty curse he saw on Koa and the others before. He wondered, were these ants already taken over completely? No answers came, because the ants just kept slamming into the barrier again and again. With no room to think straight, Tenno made a guess. Maybe two beings were trapped inside each ant, like someone being possessed. If their real consciousness was bound, then the curse might be holding their souls hostage. It was only a hypothesis, but he imagined the ants' true selves locked away, unable to move. So he tried something new, release bind. The moment the spell hit, a ring of light flared across their bodies, burning through the curse. Slowly, the black patterns faded, and the ants collapsed as their awareness returned. One by one, they woke up with their true minds restored, before fainting from exhaustion. Their last memories were grim. The forest was swallowed by black magic. The river vanishes, fruits turning into poison. The forest kings are fighting back, but disappearing one after another. Somehow, none of them could reach the humans responsible for all this chaos. Then, new monsters appeared, and darkness consumed everything. Their vision turned pitch black as the curse wrapped around them, and they feared they'd eventually turn into another being that would destroy the forest. So the ants fled, heading toward the water dragon's nest to beg for help. That was the final thing they remembered. When they opened their eyes again, the first thing they saw was Tenno, gently patting the head of their leader, Anfarumi, the Ant King. Koa, after recovering from shock, finally recognized him. Before long, Anfarumi guided them somewhere deeper inside the cave. Koa assured Tenno it was safe, so they followed for about 30 minutes until they reached a sealed-off area. Tenno cast a light spell, and the truth became clear. The place was drenched in a curse. This was supposed to be the water dragon's dwelling, a sacred lake overflowing with pure magic. But now it was corrupted beyond belief. Annoyed at how much suffering this curse had caused, Tenno didn't hold back. He poured his mana out, visualizing a massive spell, curse absorption and purification spreading across the forest, followed by release bind to free every trapped soul. and then smashing the curse back at its source twice as hard. The moment he cast it, a huge explosion of light erupted across the forest. Even from inside the cave, they felt the shockwave. Tenno stayed focused, cleansing the last traces of corruption inside the cavern, and when it was finally done, the darkness lifted, revealing a once-lost holy lake. Clear water, rich magic, and a breathtaking view shimmered before them. The water dragon's dwelling was finally restored. With the ants finally freed and the curse lifted, the encounter ended with an unexpected reward, an absolutely stunning lake hidden deep inside the cave. None of them noticed the faint bubbles rising from its depths though. Tenno and the wolves had already stepped back outside. Honestly, he never thought a simple search for cooking spices would turn into all that. But he wasn't complaining. As they continued their ingredient hunt, and Furumi quietly tailed them. Well, not exactly quietly. A giant ant's footsteps were impossible to miss, but Tenno didn't mind. While exploring, Tenno stumbled upon a new type of fruit. Strange shape, odd color. One bite later, he froze. The fruit tasted salty, exactly the flavor he'd been craving for so long. That discovery alone was enough to make his day. Meanwhile, far away on the human side of the forest, Mizlost, the 4th Chivalric Order's commander, fell down in disbelief. The troops he brought to investigate were acting weird. Their faces stiff, their movements numb, as if they were drowning in some deep despair. Something had clearly happened, but what exactly?